Coming up on the Civil Discourse, Drexel University President John Fry discusses the importance of civil discourse in today's society, plus highlights from our legacy program, the Drexel Interview.
A lot of my work at the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce was to convene around, the big challenges facing Philadelphia. And so I spent a lot of my time talking about civil discourse. What can we do in a very civic way to bring our institutions and our neighborhoods together to think about how we take on some of those seminal challenges. And while, again, you can't solve a whole lot of problems in 2 years, you can get a whole lot of people to get to know each other. And some of the things that I think are beginning to happen now are the result of people meeting each other, honestly, for the first time and realizing that the differences that they thought they had are actually not quite that large at all. In fact, more binds us together.
Now we'd like to spend the remainder of this episode sharing excerpts from some of our most popular and interesting episodes of the Drexel Interview, featuring figures whom we think model the civility and seriousness to which we are devoted. As social critics, advocates for social justice, what would you like to see on the university campus or in the university curriculum or in general in education in the next decade or so?
I want a radical severance, of bureaucratic intrusion and powers into the social lives of the students. And I'm going to be trying to encourage the students themselves to rebel, and to say, get out of our private lives, because right now the movement is in the opposite direction, more and more controls by the substitute parent figures of the administration.
These issues are not going to go away as we become more heterogeneous, more globalized. There are going to continue to be struggles over civil rights on all kinds of levels. We need to be having these tough conversations, and we need to, as educators, do everything that we can to promote everyone being able to participate in those conversations.
And you don't have to be a socialist to be Marxist. I mean, Marxism is a supposedly objective theory of history and the laws of motion of political economy and so forth. It's actually quite persuasive. I mean, if you look at, as a Marxist, at the recent developments in the American economy and the stock market and the nationalization of industry and the falling rate of profit and the fight between finance and industrial capital, it's amazing. I mean, this is exactly the kind of thing that he was always so good at analyzing.
I interviewed your friend Christopher Hitchens before his death, and it was one of my favorite interviews of all time. I believe you share his views about religion.
Oh, yeah, about that. There are plenty of things that Christopher and I disagreed about, but religion wasn't one of them.
He was moving toward the right in some areas. Yes. Did you quarrel with him over that?
Oh, yes, we argued about it a lot. Now, that was one of the things about Christopher is you could have the argument. You
could always have an argument.
You could have the argument, and it didn't really affect your friendship with him. I mean, I strongly disagree at that moment when he became slightly too close to the kind of Wolfowitz-Cheney gang.
Yeah, he supported that war. Yeah.
I thought that was, I wasn't able to understand that really. And many of his friends, many of his closest friends argued with him constantly about that.
By the second year, we knew we had a following. And then by the third year, I knew that we were doing really, really beautiful work. And when I say beautiful work, I mean that it was doing art that was really being impactful, that, it wasn't arbitrary, that people were, it was the place to reflect on some of the issues that David was bringing up about the dysfunction of the American society and cities, and specifically the drug war. And so I knew it was a very special job.
So to me, it makes absolute sense that we would be fighting over monuments because that's a proxy for trying to figure out who we are as a people.
Yeah, in order for that to happen, there's a period of deconstruction, and so there's a breaking down of what we thought did represent us. But now, as we start to re-examine what is equity, what is representation, what do these terms mean? It's like as a country, we're having an identity crisis, and it's good, and it's painful, and it's difficult, and it's hard. But these are questions that we have to be asking ourselves.
And who are we?
And who are we?
Because when we put up monuments, it wasn't all we.
And you see, when we neoconservatives began singing these hymns of praise to America, we attracted an enormous amount of attention. Why? Because it was so unusual for accredited intellectuals to have a good word to say about America, especially at that period. It was a man bites dog phenomenon.
There were so few options for women in those days.
Yeah.
And I wanted to walk in a career where my mind would be my currency, where longevity in the career would be an advantage, not a disadvantage, and where no one could really stop me if I used my mind.
Yeah.
Now, the pressures, the other issues of class, race, and sex in school in those days, I think we've talked a little bit about sometimes it's easier just to put your head down, hunker down, and go for it.
Push through.
Push through.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there were slights and obstacles and downright sexist, racist things that happened.
Whites are often kind of oblivious to some of these challenges. So I wrote this column, the first one, When Whites Just Don't Get It, and then indeed got inundated with comments to say, oh, you know, basically the problem is that, you know, blacks aren't marrying, aren't doing this, aren't doing that, it's their fault. And so then I wrote the second one, the When Whites Just Don't Get It, Part 2, and then I have in mind a possible third one that I may do at some point.
Part of civil discourse is acknowledging and taking seriously the anger of vulnerable people in response to injustice and understanding it as having been catalytic to many of the movements that have transformed this country in ways that have taken many forms, whether it's out street protests and, you know, peaceful ones, or whether it's acts of civil disobedience, striking, the teacher strikes, the women's march, right? None of those were not civil. They're all civil, and they're all angry expressions.
And we are at a turning point, and your work, it seems to me, is helping to move us to that next place.
Thank you so much.
Happiness is not a continuum, it's not this prolonged thing.
Yeah.
It's moments and how you appreciate those moments. So with the backdrop of all of the things that are going on, people are happy. If they watch a football, soccer match, they will watch it and talk and laugh. If they go to a disco, they will dance. They will love genuinely and truly. They will create families with the backdrop of all of this. So happiness is not the absence of challenge in one's life. It's with those challenges the ability to move on, to live life fully, and that's the strength of my people. And so that's what's in me.
Thank you for joining us today for this episode. And please keep an eye open for our show in your local listings and online under its new title, The Civil Discourse, in the months ahead. Meanwhile, our catalog of over 15 years of the Drexel Interview will continue to be broadcast in coming years and will be available in our online archives.